The setting and the main character. It was a gloomy Friday morning in Jerusalem. Dark clouds swirled above Golgotha, as if the sky itself were awaiting a moment that would split history in two. At the foot of three crosses, Roman soldiers prepared for a familiar execution. Leading the squad was a centurion, Longinus, a battle-hardened veteran of the empire. Today's task seemed as straightforward as countless others: ensure that the condemned man died. This time, it was Jesus of Nazareth. Before that day, Longinus had devoted his entire life to the military. As a centurion, he commanded more than 100 soldiers, renowned for his iron discipline, courage, and lethal efficiency on the battlefield. Reaching such a rank required not only strength, but also intelligence, strategy, and above all, ruthlessness, qualities Longinus possessed in abundance. His life revolved around violence, order, and absolute obedience to Rome's commands. He had witnessed and carried out countless executions without the slightest stir of emotion. But that morning, before Jerusalem had fully awakened, hurried footsteps echoed through the streets, carrying whispers of a name: Jesus of Nazareth. He had been arrested the previous night in the Garden of Gethsemane, betrayed by one of his own disciples, Judas Iscariot, in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. Jesus had been brought before the Sanhedrin, accused of blasphemy for claiming to be the Son of God. Beaten, mocked, and condemned, he remained silent, offering no resistance. But the council had no authority to execute him, so they brought him to the governor, Pontius Pilate, the one who would ultimately decide his fate. In Longinus's mind, this was nothing more than another execution. He did not yet know that on that day at Golgotha, he would witness something that would change his life forever: the trial and the verdict. Jesus was brought to the governor's palace early in the morning. Pilate sat on the judgment seat, his eyes scrutinizing the prisoner before him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. Jesus calmly replied, "You say that it is true." The chief priests and elders poured out a flood of accusations, yet Jesus remained silent. Pilate was astonished. He had seen countless criminals plead, weep, or find every possible way to defend themselves, but this man was different. No begging, no arguing, only a silence that seemed to hold a power beyond human understanding. At that moment, a messenger hurried in from the inner quarters, bringing a note from Pilate's wife. "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for today I have suffered greatly in a dream because of him." The message only deepened Pilate's unease. He sensed there was something here beyond an ordinary case, yet the pressure from the crowd was mounting. According to the Passover custom, Pilate could release one prisoner. He saw a chance to free Jesus without clashing directly with the religious leaders. Before the gathered crowd, he presented the choice: "Whom do you want me to release to you, Jesus, who is called the Christ, or Barabbas, the notorious murderer?" But the chief priests and religious leaders had stirred up the crowd to shout, "Release Barabbas!" Pilate asked again, "Then what shall I do with Jesus?" The answer came back, louder and more fierce than before: "Crucify him!" Pilate reasoned, "Why? What crime has he committed?" But the cries of "Crucify, crucify!" only grew louder. Seeing he could not prevail against the fury of the crowd, Pilate called for a basin of water. In full view of the people, he washed his hands and declared, "I am innocent of this righteous man's blood. The responsibility is yours." Barabbas was set free. Jesus was handed over to the Roman soldiers for execution. To Longinus, it was simply another order, no different from countless others before. He had no idea that at this very moment, his own fate was being sealed, not by Rome, but by the one he was about to lead to Golgotha. The journey to the cross. The gates of the governor's palace swung open, and the early light poured into the soldiers' courtyard. Jesus stood there, stripped of his garments, his body streaked with blood after a night of beatings. Longinus, as always, stood firm at the entrance, the cold eyes of a man long accustomed to violence. Roman soldiers tied Jesus to a stone pillar and lashed his back with whips embedded with metal and bone. Each strike tore into his flesh, yet Jesus made no cry, offered no resistance, only endured in silence, as though accepting it all for a purpose greater than pain. The soldiers mocked him, draping a purple robe over his shoulders, pressing a sharp crown of thorns upon his head so that blood streamed down his face. They placed a reed in his hand like a scepter, kneeling in false homage. "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they spat on him and struck his head hard. Longinus did not join in their cruel sport. He simply watched, and for the first time in years, a faint unease crept into his heart. When the soldiers had grown weary of their torment, they returned his clothes and laid upon his shoulders the heavy wooden cross, stained with the blood of many before him. Longinus took the lead, clearing the way through narrow streets. The crowd pressed in, some shouting curses, some hurling stones, but others weeping bitterly. Among them, Mary, his mother, searched for his eyes. Jesus' steps slowed until he collapsed, the cross crushing his exhausted body. He rose and continued, only to fall again. Mary rushed to his side, her trembling hand touching his bloodied face. "I am here," she whispered. Jesus replied softly, "Do you see, mother? All things are being made new." These were not words of comfort, but of prophecy. When he stumbled once more, Longinus ordered a man from the crowd, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross in his place. The crucifixion and death of Jesus. At the summit of Golgotha, 3 crosses stood ready. Jesus was placed in the center, with 2 criminals on either side. Without resistance, he stretched out his arms as if willingly offering himself. One soldier held his arm firmly, another raised the hammer. The sound of nails piercing wood rang out, sharp and hollow. Mary trembled. John turned his face away, while the crowd was either tensely silent or still hurling insults. When the cross was raised upright, Jesus' body swayed in unbearable agony. One of the criminals mocked, "If you are the Christ, save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, "We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he turned to Jesus and said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus replied, "Today you will be with me in paradise." An unnatural darkness covered the whole land. Longinus still stood guard, his eyes fixed on the cross. He clearly heard Jesus say, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Those words pierced the heart of the Roman soldier, long accustomed to spilled blood and desperate pleas. Below, Mary wept in grief, John supporting her. Jesus looked at his mother, then at John. "Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother." As his strength ebbed away, Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Someone quickly offered him sour wine, but he refused. Lifting his eyes, he said, "It is finished." Then, summoning his last breath, he declared, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He bowed his head and gave up his last breath. At that moment, the earth shook, rocks split apart, and the temple curtain tore from top to bottom. The crowd was seized with fear, and many beat their chests in remorse. Longinus fell to his knees and trembling exclaimed, "Surely this man was the Son of God." In that moment, the Roman officer was no longer merely an executioner. He had become the first Gentile witness to believe in the crucified one. The miracle and conversion of Longinus, after Jesus breathed his last. The Jewish leaders asked Pilate to have the legs of the condemned broken so they would die quickly before the Sabbath. The order was given to Longinus. He commanded the soldiers to strike the 2 thieves' legs with iron rods, breaking them instantly. When they came to Jesus, Longinus saw that he was already dead, but Roman law required confirmation. Taking his spear, he stepped forward and thrust it cleanly into Jesus' side. At once, blood and water flowed out, staining the spearhead and running down onto his face. According to tradition, Longinus suffered from an eye disease, his vision clouded and dim. But the moment that drop of blood and water touched him, his sight was instantly restored. He froze in place. Deep within, he knew he had just witnessed the fulfillment of the prophecy. They will look on the one they have pierced. Looking down at the blood-stained spear, Longinus understood. The man he had just executed was no criminal, but the very Son of God. He knelt again, but this time not as an officer before a corpse, rather as a believer before the Savior. From that moment on, his heart no longer belonged to Rome. In the days that followed, he could not sleep. The image of Jesus on the cross, the words of forgiveness, the eyes full of love burned within his mind like a flame that would not die out. Rumors spread throughout the city. The tomb was empty, and some had seen him alive again. Longinus heard, and instead of doubting, he believed at once in his heart. Death could not hold him. He left the army, returned his armor, and laid his sword upon the ground. No longer an instrument of violence, he became a messenger of the gospel. Joining the community of disciples, Longinus began telling the story he had seen with his own eyes. "I saw him die. and in that death I found life. From an executioner, he became the first witness among the Gentiles, his heart ablaze with the faith kindled by the blood of the one who was crucified. The mission and martyrdom of Longinus. After leaving the army, Longinus departed from Jerusalem, carrying with him his newfound faith and the spear that had pierced the side of Jesus as a sacred mark. He traveled through many regions of the Roman Empire, proclaiming the one he had once executed. From a soldier, he became a sower of the gospel, telling all who would listen what he had seen and heard. The darkness at noon, the earth trembling, and the words of forgiveness Jesus spoke in the midst of agony. Longinus's preaching touched many hearts. He drew on his own experience as a soldier to explain the power of God's love, a force greater than any weapon of the empire. Yet this very message made him a target for Roman authorities, who saw Christianity as a threat to the imperial order. According to tradition, Longinus returned to his homeland of Cappadocia, continuing to proclaim the good news, even though he knew danger was drawing near. When an arrest warrant was issued, he did not flee. Standing before the court, he boldly declared, "I am the one who crucified Jesus, and I am also the one who has believed in him. I cannot deny the one who gave me life." The judge promised to spare his life if he renounced his faith, but Longinus only smiled. He knew this death would not be like the ones he had witnessed before. This would be the path leading him to the one he loved. Eventually, he was sentenced to death. Tradition says that, as he was beheaded, Longinus's face remained serene, his eyes lifted toward heaven as if beholding Jesus once more. His death did not silence his story, but became the seed of faith for generations to come. Believers preserve the memory of the Roman centurion who had been completely transformed from an executioner to a martyred saint. A church was built in his honor, and his spear became one of the treasured relics of the faithful. Longinus lived and died as a living testimony to the truth he had once proclaimed on the hill of Golgotha. Truly, this man was the Son of God.